Welcome, welcome everybody. Welcome back with in the third part of the interview with Professor Boaz Ganor. My name is Bart Collard. If you are just watching this, make sure you saw the first and the second videos, because otherwise you missed the great stuff we talked about. We are now switching to the topic of mis and disinformation. Well, we generally define misinformation as information which is untrue, but that is shared without a malice intent. And disinformation is usually regarded as untrue information, but then the intention of sharing the information is evil, or it does harm to persons, and it is intentionally harmful. So Boaz, how do you see the current threat of mis and disinformation in your country, Israel, or in the entire world, maybe?
Well, I do believe that the challenge of contending with mis and disinformation, probably one of the biggest challenges in the world today, for Israel and for the rest of the world. And you would be surprised, even more than terrorism itself. Because practically today, there is no way of differing between truth and lies. And there is no technology that can do the job. There is no certain type of modus operandi that we can adopt. And we tend to believe whatever we're already believing in. So we tend to listen and to be influenced by argumentation that supports our own point of view. And this becomes a real danger and a bigger phenomenon due to modern technology, and especially social networks and internet activities. Because today, many of those internet providers and social networks, they actually they analyze and identify our views, and they send to us material which they know that we would want to consume, information that we would want to consume. And the information has to do with supporting our own views. When this process is taking a long period of time, it contributes a lot to extremism, regardless on what subject. It could be political issues, it could be environmental issues, it could be positive issues and negative issues. Regardless, you become more extremist because you are exposed to your own views, sometimes harsher views than yours, and not to the other argumentation, and you don't have the ability even to contend with different views in this regard. When this is being done without any malice intent, it's a huge problem. But when this being done and orchestrated deliberately with malice intention, that's a huge threat to any community and any country around the world. And today we have governments, we have non-government organizations, we have private companies that misuse the new capabilities in order to intensify this danger by using bots, and using avatars and many other measures that gives them the ability to give you the impact or the feeling that you are surrounded with like-minded, that leading you what is needed to be done, and that might even lead to terrorism, or terrorist activity, or other type of violent activities. Unfortunately, we in Israel didn't find a solution to that problem yet, nor that I believe that any state has yet a solution. And that's why I think that this is a real threat to world peace altogether.
Thank you for that. And I was just thinking, because you mentioned like the blurry line we are getting between how do we know what is real and what is not. I saw a podcast, or I listened to a podcast 2 weeks ago, I think, and it was a podcast by Joe Rogan. I think he has like the I think he has the most listeners in the world, I think, in his podcast. But he had a new project that he set up, and it was a project with a company called OpenAI. And what they did is they had a podcast of 45 minutes. It was a conversation between Rogan and I think the CEO of the company, of the AI company. And no words were scripted at all. And the podcast was generated. So the voices of Rogan and his conversation partner, they were generated through previous audio records of them. But the computer also created the entire script of their conversation. So it starts off with Joe Rogan, but it's not Joe Rogan, who says, this is not me. This is completely AI generated. So do not cut out snippets because no single word was ever written or created by a man, only by computers. And if you listen to the conversation, it's actually, especially if you don't know them, you're like, this is genuine. And even if you know them, and you don't know it's fake, then you'll probably think it's true. And I saw that he just made a new one with Donald Trump. So yes. Audio, a computer manufactured conversation with Donald Trump. And if you hear it, there might be small things that if you're very sharp, then you might know, hey, something might be going on here. But in general, it's already, the quality is so good, and this causes such a challenge for the world.
So Bart, I'll tell you something. The only truth that I really know is that I'm speaking to you right now.
There you go.
I don't really know if you are a real thing, so maybe you're deep fake as well. So I don't know, but I'm speaking to you.
You know, I'm a real thing, but you're not sure if you're talking to me right now.
Exactly.
Exactly. There you go. But still, we have an interesting conversation, whether it's me or not. It's good for our viewers and listeners to hear this. But I think it's very interesting. And I would say, so apart from the threat that is coming from mis and disinformation, thinkers such as myself have also warned for a potential government response to this threat, because it's such a, as you say, the threat might even be bigger than terrorism in general. So, and I see that governments and organizations, they're struggling in how to deal with it, because now we can sort of handle it, but what in 10 years? So we have to think about that. And I wrote a book on misinformation, which will be published probably by the end of June in 2023, which is about this topic, because like the potential responses of governments might cause a threat to freedom of speech and other liberties we have, because, well, obviously governments, organizations, tech companies, they regularly talk about removing content, which in some cases might be a good idea, but definitely in a lot of cases might also be causing liberal issues. And my criticism to that approach is, who do we want to determine for us what is untrue and therefore should be removed, or what would be harmful? And clearly, we don't want the government to determine that, right? Because who else? You know, what is true and what should be restrictions for free speech? And so my point is that we should act upon this, that if we act upon disinformation, it should not be done because it is untrue, but mainly because it's a violation of something that was already in our criminal code, because it's harmful in a certain way, causing violence, or because it's defamation or slander. But that we should be very specific, because if we don't do that, I fear that that at some point, you know, if you have a very strong government and then you have a strong opposition as well, that you might use it, you know, to silence the opposition a little bit. And this is, I think, the dilemma that you call the democratic dilemma as well, the dilemma between civil rights and security, maybe, or safety. How do you think that we should balance with regards to disinformation?
First of all, I find myself agreeing fully with everything you've said, and I'm looking forward to read your new book that will come soon.
I'm not sure if there's a Hebrew translation.
It's in Dutch. So okay, but we have AI that can translate that now.
There you go.
Yeah. And yes, as I said before, I do believe that the problem of trying to distinguish between truth and a lie, the incapability of doing so, it's something that threatens the safety of the world today. But I fully agree with you at the same time that giving the prerogative to a state to define for us what is true and what is a lie, it's no less dangerous outcome, because then it might be manipulated for political reasons and serve dictators practically for that purposes. And you rightly noted in referring to that as part of what I call the democratic dilemma in counterterrorism. Now, the democratic dilemma in counterterrorism tells us that when democracies are trying to contend with terrorism, they need to find the right balance between effectiveness in counterterrorism and guarding liberal democratic values. Because, like it or not, there is a contradiction between the two. Some people turn a blind eye to this contradiction. I remember the first inauguration speech of President Obama in his first term. He was saying something along those lines. We regard it as false that there is a contradiction between our values and our security. And I beg to differ. Actually, I think that President Obama at the end of the second term would differ from President Obama at the beginning of the first term.
Yes.
He knew after the Apple case, the marathon bombing and so on and so forth, that there is a contradiction between our values and our security. And the whole challenge in counterterrorism, which is conducted by a democracy, is really to find the right balance between the two, knowing that in order to achieve some effectiveness in counterterrorism, sometimes you need to sacrifice some values, hopefully very neglectable one, but still it's the case. And in order to preserve your fundamental liberal democratic values, you need sometimes to sacrifice some of your security for that purpose. And that's very difficult for a liberal Democrat decision maker to do, because if he would lean too much to the liberal democratic values and it will be on the account of effectiveness in counterterrorism, in a liberal democracy, he will not stay in power.
Mm-hmm.
People will not vote for him because it threatens their security. And vice versa, if he would lean too much to the security, he would lose his liberal democratic values. He cannot be regarded and will not be voted as a liberal Democrat afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So finding the right balance, in my view, it's the challenge. Going back to the question of misunderstanding and misinformation and disinformation, I tend to believe, maybe I'm naive, that in the future and not too long, we might have technology that will help us to identify. If we have today technology, as you mentioned, deep fake technology, that it's incapable for a human being to differ between a person who is giving a video lecture as I do right now, if it's a real person or not. Mm-hmm. There will be technology in the future that would give us the ability to acknowledge the fact that this is an artificial intelligence who's doing that.
That's what I'm hoping for as well, because otherwise we will have a real challenge at hand. But we'll see. So could you maybe share a little bit about what does Israel do with regard to disinformation right now? What is Israel's policies, or what is it doing against it?
Well, I have to admit that Israel is not a leading example in this field, nor that I see any other country that solved the problem. I mean, I don't know if you are aware, but we have now in Israel a lot of civil tension based on judicial reform. The criticizers saying judicial revolution that the government is trying to conduct, and it's causing a huge disputes with hundreds of thousands of demonstrators from both sides. No doubt in my mind that both sides are being incited by external forces using bots, using avatars, using disinformation campaigns, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that people, unfortunately, the public at large is not aware to that. And the first thing is awareness. And the public is not aware that they are under this type of attack, external attack. And therefore, Israel, in my view, is not having a good solution that can become a model of imitation to other countries.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So, and what should be done about the systematically sharing of harmful information about the state of Israel or Jews? And maybe it's important to distinguish between the state, Israel, and the people, the Jews. What should be done with anti-Semitic online posts? Because in the Netherlands, I mean, we have a very small Jewish community, but I see a lot of anti-Semitic posts actually.
Well, anti-Semitism is a real old and ongoing problem around the world. We saw anti-Semitism atrocities being conducted through history. I can go to the Bible if you wish, but I won't get that far. I'll talk about the Spanish Inquisition. I'll talk about riots against Jews in Eastern Europe, in Russia, and of course the Holocaust, and we can add so many other very severe occurrences of anti-Semitism. But the problem is that you see anti-Semitism on a daily basis in every back street in the Western society, in third world countries, and so on and so forth. Sometimes people that never saw a Jew in their life hate him even before they know what's a Jew and who's a Jew. I differ, by the way, between three types of anti-Semitism. The classical anti-Semitism, the type of the people that I described now, those have been educated to hate Jews, and naturally they hate Jews. As said, some of them never saw Jews in their lives, but they hate Jews because they're Jews, because they argue that they killed Christ or any other blood label that can be added to that. And as an outcome of the fact that they hate Jews, they also hate Israel. Those are the classical anti-Semitists. But you have the new anti-Semitists. And the new anti-Semitist is the opposite one. Mainly we're talking about Muslims, Arabs, and their supporters, which they have anti-Semitism based on political perceptions. They hate Israel, and therefore they hate Jews. So it's a reverse
indirect,
hatred. There is a third group, which is the biggest group in my view, and without insulting anyone, I refer to them as the useful idiots. Now, who are the useful idiots? The useful idiots practically are the best people on earth. The people that I really want to be a friend of. Why? Because they are loving people. They always want to defend the weak side. They have this inclination to support the person that doesn't have the upper hand. And for their point of view, Israel is the Goliath, Palestinians are the victims, and therefore they have been influenced by ongoing narratives. I don't want to say incitement, but Palestinian and Arab narratives, and they do not buy the Israeli narrative in this regard. Now, as a human being, and even as an Israeli, I do say that criticizing Israel is a legitimate act. I mean, even me sometimes find myself criticizing some things that the Israeli government is doing, like many other governments altogether, far from being perfect. But when you harshly criticize Israel in a way that single out Israel compared to other countries, talking about human rights. I mean, when I see UN resolutions that are being voted by countries like Syria, like Russia, like China, condemning Israel for so-called harming civil rights, I'm saying that's a new type of political anti-Semitism. Israel is suffering from something which is not relevant. But the question that we need to pose to ourselves is how should we or can we contend with online anti-Semitism and with online phenomenon? And here I would say that it's not that different from contending with online incitement for violence and violent activity. You rightly noted before that you don't want governments to decide what is truth and what is a lie. but you expect things to be done when the online platform is being misused for unlegal acts. Inciting for violence, it's an unlegal act. Same thing I would say in reference to anti-Semitism. When people are using anti-Semitism in order to call other people to use violent activities against Jews. By the way, same thing in reference to Islamophobic reaction. There is no difference here. Then I think there is an obligation of the social networks to do whatever is needed to identify those messages and to uproot them. And they're doing that as much, I don't know if as much as they can, but they're doing that, at least trying to do so with new technology, with departments of monitoring incitement. Of course, it's needed to be done more effectively because it's very difficult to deal with this online incitement.
Thank you very much. And with this, I think we conclude the part on mis and disinformation. And then I want to jump towards the threats for the future. So in your opinion, which organizations or states will constitute the biggest threat with regards to terrorism for the next decade or so? And I know you don't include states in your definition, but I mean, they might still constitute to a threat because they support financially or based on technology or whatever. And why?
I differ between three types of very problematic and negative trends in terrorism today and in the foreseen future. First one is Sunni extremist terrorism. And here I mainly refer to what we know under the title of global jihad, Al-Qaeda, ISIS type of activities. Of course, we have others, and we might have new ones popping up in the future. So that's one negative trend. The second negative trend is Shiite extremism, which is mainly being presented by Hezbollah, by Shiite militias in Iraq, in Syria, and by the Houthis in Yemen, and so on and so forth. The third type of negative terrorist trend, which is a growing trend, is right-wing, far-right extremism. Those are three trends that, if you ask me what I think is the most dangerous one, I think that the Shiite terrorism is the most dangerous one, and I will explain why. First of all, and here is the connection to states, because it's state-sponsored, because we have a huge state that is dedicated to promote Shiite terrorism, to promote Hezbollah terrorism, the Shiite militias terrorism, the Houthis terrorism, and I refer to Iran. Iran is spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year to support those terrorist organizations and actually promote their terrorist activity altogether. This is part of the vision of the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Khomeini, that on the day that he conducted the revolution in Iran in late 70s, he declared that the goal is to export the Khomeini revolution to other communities and other countries around the world. So they have this concept of using proxies, Shiite proxies, for that purpose. The second reason why I think that the Shiite terrorism is the most dangerous one is because the Iranians are very smart. And although they are Shiites, it's a Shiite country, although there is a fundamental dispute between Shiite and Sunnis within the Muslim world, Iran is not reluctant to support also Sunni terrorist organizations if that promotes the interest of Iran. And the two best examples would be Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which became a total Iranian proxy. They controlled the organization, and Hamas, which also enjoyed the support of Iran, although it's not a total proxy of Iran, but definitely get a lot of support from Iran in order to attack Israel. And the third reason is because Iran, as we speak, is becoming a nuclear, at least regional superpower. It's a matter of short time, if there will not be an intervention in the process, that Iran would have nuclear bombs. Some say it's a matter of weeks or months, up to a year, not more than that. No doubt in my mind that once they would have the nuclear capability, they will be more more capable and more ready to support and actually push their proxies to have more terrorist activities around the world, because they would not be afraid from retaliation in the homeland, in Iran, from other countries. That's why I think it's another trend which is very dangerous. The last one is a unique one, and I think I'm one of the only people who actually refers to that. As you know, Al-Qaeda lost, Al-Qaeda lost their leadership by mainly American targeted killings, Bin Laden, Zawahiri, and so on and so forth. And officially, they didn't nominate the next leader of Al-Qaeda. One of the names which is being raised, and as some says more probably than others, is Saif al-Adel. Saif al-Adel was one of the heads of Al-Qaeda that when the American-led invasion to Afghanistan after 9/11 occurred, he fled away through the border of Afghanistan to Iran. At first, he was in jail for a few years, and then he got the protection of Iran, and he's living in Iran. He's now traveling in different countries, but he might be the next leader of Al-Qaeda. If he will become the next leader of Al-Qaeda, we would see a very dangerous axis of joint venture between extremist Sunni global jihadist terrorist organization and extremist Shia terrorist organization, all being orchestrated by Iran. This is why, in my view, that's the biggest danger in the foreseen future in reference to terrorism.
Yes, and imagine Al-Qaeda having major fundings by Iran as well.
Exactly.
And what do you think would be the major counterterrorism challenge for the next decade then?
The main counterterrorism challenges would have an immediate connection to the question of technology. But it would be two different types of technological challenges. The first one has to do with how terrorist organizations and terrorists might use emerging technologies in the near future and in the far future. I'm talking about AI. We talked about deepfake, for example. I'm talking about 3D printers. I'm talking about crypto, drones, robotics, and non-conventional capabilities, chemical, biological, God forbid, even nuclear. This is a growing threat because, you know, we are living in a world which is rapidly being developed technologically wise. Youngsters, I mean, my kids are much more technologically acquainted with these capabilities than I am, and their kids would be more than them. And terrorists are not different from that. They are living in the same surrounding, and they might misuse, they will misuse those technologies in the future. So trying to analyze today how they would misuse those technologies and prevent as much as we can this misuse by regulations, by intelligence, by other types of activities. This is the task of intelligence services today, in my view. The other thing is the opposite side. As we discussed the individual attacker challenge and the incapability of the traditional intelligence to deal with that, the intelligence services need to find themselves experiencing reform, a technological reform, even a revolution, if you wish, a technological revolution in their activity. They need to adopt different modus operandi that would rely on these emerging technologies, and they need to develop new tools in their toolbox to contend with terrorism. The only caveat that need to be remembered all the time, that these new technologies, even when they are being used for positive purposes, for counterterrorism, which I see that as a positive purpose, always combine moral and value dilemmas that need to be discussed. Those moral and values dilemmas, and here we close maybe our discussion to the beginning of our first chapter, has to do with, first and foremost, define what is terrorism. Without the definition of terrorism, we cannot start to deal with the moral values that has to do with countering terrorism and with the technologies, new technologies that will emerge in the effort of countering terrorism.
And it is interesting, isn't it, that we don't have, as I said in the first clip, in the Netherlands, even like the three biggest counterterrorism organizations, they have different definitions. And probably there's a few more if I include other organizations as well. So, but still we are countering it, but sometimes we should maybe slow down, think about what we're doing, as well.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe as for the final part of our conversation for today, could you maybe, if you would have one advice for professionals in the field of counterterrorism or extremism, what would be it?
I would say the following. Terrorists or terrorism is a dynamic phenomenon. It changes as we speak. It's evolved all the time. One cannot lay back in his chair and say, I'm an expert on counterterrorism. I know anything that needed to be known on counterterrorism. And unfortunately, I know some people that believes that they are that level of expert that nobody can educate them and teach them anything about the phenomenon of terrorism. It's not the case, because terrorism changes all the time. Terrorism evolves. The terrorists are on a learning curve all the time. And therefore, counterterrorism needs to be on the same learning curve, actually one step ahead. The counter-terrorists cannot afford to lag behind the evolution of terrorism, and therefore my recommendation to counter-terrorists, wherever they are, keep on learning the phenomenon, keep on challenging your own concepts, your own strategies, keep on developing your own technologies, because you're dealing with an evolving phenomenon.
And how would you suggest they do it? Whether it's practitioners or whether it's academics or whatever. How can people increase their knowledge or skills about counterterrorism, extremism, radicalization?
Before the 11th of September 2001, the number of counterterrorism experts, I'm talking about scholars, around the world was very, very few. You can count them on one hand or two hands. That's it. The number of centers of excellence, research institutes for counterterrorism was very, very minor. ICT, the Institute for Counterterrorism in our university, was established in 1996, 5 years before 9/11. But at that time, I think there was only St. Andrews that was active, and Rand Corporation. That's it. The three were the only institute in the world that dealt with counterterrorism. And the literature was very minor altogether. Today, we are fortunate to have many experts, dozens, hundreds of them around the world, who's analyzing, researching the phenomenon of terrorism, referring to that as an interdisciplinary phenomenon, coming from different disciplines, different approaches. Some of that is very good research, some of them is lesser than that, but nevertheless, one can learn from all of the type of the research. Of course, I would highly recommend to be engaged with the activity of ICT, either coming to the World Summit that we're conducting in Israel for experts and for the public at large, always on the week of the 11th of September. It's the world biggest meeting of experts in the world dealing with the new trends of terrorism. I would definitely highly recommend to take our MA program in counterterrorism, the one that you took, Bart.
I can recommend that one too.
And we were fortunate to have you as a student of ours, actually, to learn from you. I learn a lot from my students, by the way. That's something which is very important. So the MA program in counterterrorism and homeland security in English is very useful. And also other courses, the executive course that we are conducting every summer, which is going to be also online. So to contact ICT in this regard and learn about those activities. I would also recommend to read a lot of literature. There is a lot of literature out there. Among the very good books that many wrote, I would mention Bruce Hoffman, Brian Jenkins, Martha Crenshaw, many others, colleagues of mine. I would also recommend my books that mainly are dealing with counterterrorism, such as the Counterterrorism Puzzle, Global Alert, and the two recent books, the Israeli Counterterrorism Strategy and the Israel Targeted Killing Policy, and many other articles. Learning. That's the key factor of coming with better practices, better solutions, and better theories to contend terrorism altogether.
I think that's very nice, nice words, and I would add to that, even if you're a professional, just try and take your time every now and then to reflect upon what you're doing, because I think I spoke with a lot of professionals in this field, and usually it's just they keep going and going and going. It's so many cases, and every day there is threats they are dealing with. But see if you can reflect upon what you're doing, because I think it's so important, as you said, to read and to maybe even watch conversations like this.
Right.
Yeah. So I think with this answer, Boaz, we came to the end of our conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. I think our viewers can and will benefit a lot from it. I really appreciate that you took the time. We will see each other offline soon, I hope. Thank you very much. Well, it was my pleasure.
Thank you very much, Bart, for having me. It's always a pleasure to have this kind of discussion with you. And I do hope to see you in Israel, maybe in the World Summit in September.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.